Hello and welcome everyone to the Solo Multimedia Podcast where I give you my unfiltered takes straight off the cuff. And today I'm going to be talking about the new album from Black Country New Road, Ants from Up There. Now, first things first, I feel like I have to confess a sin. I don't particularly enjoy the first Black Country New Road record. I was not as enamored with it as a lot of people seem to be. So, for those who don't know, this band are a rock band, like an experimental arty rock band who play with genres like post-punk, post-rock, and on the previous album, they always had kind of their own unique sound. I'll say that much because they use a pretty big instrumental palette, which was always probably the biggest appeal to me about the band for sure. Like, I think the previous album's opening instrumental cut was always one of my favourites because it's such a fun, energetic, frenetic song that has so many different ideas hitting you at different times. And I always found it slightly unfortunate that a lot of the record ended up just being, I don't know, kind of like a lot of slow songs. Because I always felt like they didn't pull those off quite as well, even though they were attempting to go for quite a lot of like emotional potency. So I understood where they were coming from for sure, and I don't think they're like a terrible band or anything. I actually saw them live last year, and they were really good, like way better than I was expecting, but I still couldn't quite get into the record. So, with all that said, I was quite eager to get into this new one, mostly because I heard from a lot of people I trust and respect, and I've also seen a lot of the discourse online saying that it's basically a masterpiece, which is one hell of a pedestal to put something like this on. Firstly, and secondly, despite the fact that I was, excited to listen to it, there was slight hesitation for the same reason, because people seem to enjoy this one so much, and I've been seeing it, like, people discussing it everywhere across the internet. There was a bit of hesitation, because I was like, well, the last one people seem to really like, and I wonder if it's just kind of more of the same, but slightly better. And I'm pleased to say that I'm really enjoying this one as well. Like, I actually think on a first listen, this was fucking great, and I am kind of stunned that it's as good as it is. So firstly, the core differences, I think, are that they are actually using, at least to my ears. Now, I'll say really quick, on the debut record, what I said about the slower songs being less detailed and less interesting, that's going off like memory. After listening to this, I almost can't imagine that being the case, so I feel like I have to go back and listen to it again, because everything across this album is so detailed. There's so much like rhythmic and melodic interplay between instruments. There's so many little like 5 second super detailed little motifs that will pop up and just disappear. And for a record with songs this expansive is really impressive, especially considering it all goes over so well and feels so natural. So that's, to my ears, the first thing that changed. And secondly, there's a decent chunk of, I don't know what the exact genre would be, but I think it's either chamber pop or baroque pop or something like that. You guys can correct me in the comments if anyone's listening. Because I don't know how you describe it exactly, but there is a more playful quality to a lot of these songs. It's not just as kind of like, I don't want to say overwhelmingly sad as the previous record, because that record definitely wasn't like overwhelmingly sad, but that record did have like an air of moodiness to the whole thing, and this has that too, but the fact that it has this kind of almost like playfulness to a lot of the instrumentation really helps it feel brighter and more colourful, at least to me. So yeah, this is, in my opinion, a huge step up, and I'm just going to go through the songs one by one, essentially. One thing I will say actually is, for the first half of the record, you get a lot of stuff you're familiar with Black Country New Road. It's a lot of those kind of like decently lengthed songs with, a lot of, one thing I will credit the first record for actually, and it's still a huge strength here, is they have a huge dynamic range, where they will, they'll have moments where they just strip the whole song back and you've more or less just got guitar and very like, almost whisper quiet vocals over the top of it, and then they'll have moments of, huge explosive moments that feel like post-rock climaxes, and that's still definitely going on here. But the first half of the record is kind of what you expect to some extent, and then the final 3 songs are the equivalent length of the rest of the record, because they're some of the most long and ambitious songs that this band have ever really attempted, I think. And I basically love all of them, but we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. So the whole record kicks off with intro, which is An instrumental, similarly, in a similar way to the previous record, I guess, but it's much shorter. It's like only like a minute long. I didn't actually take any notes on it because I just thought it was a cool little instrumental way to kick off the record. I didn't have a ton to say about it. But the first proper song, Chaos Space Marine, is probably one of the most overt in its new influence of these kind of peppier sounds in this kind of like chamber pop direction, I guess. And the instrumental interplay on this like song is just utterly fantastic. It's really playful, very kind of instrumentally diverse, and signals that change in sound. It's a bit of a flurry of ideas, but the core of the song is a really peppy piano part with the frontman's almost kind of muted vocals over the top of it. And this is intertwined with huge rhythmic flourishes, and the whole thing takes a huge inspiration, like I said, from chamber pop, which again is something I wasn't really expecting. So it was really cool to hear the record just kick off with its MO, I suppose. I really appreciate that. The next song, Concord, it's kind of more in line what you would expect if you've listened to only the previous record, I guess, and none of the singles from here. It's kind of a slow acoustic-driven song with the frontman delivering quite a muted singing style, kind of in a similar way to what you would expect from post-rock. It's almost, from post-punk. It's almost, I don't want to say spoken word, it's definitely sung, but it sits in that sort of vocal range, I guess, as with the spoken word stuff. And I do find this song to have a lot more embellishments and details, like I said, compared to a lot of the other slower, more muted songs on the previous record. And this really kept my attention the whole way through. I think the bass groove underneath really holds the song together, keeps it very cohesive, and allows for all of these different ideas to kind of come in and out of the mix. It builds very naturally with lots of different ideas, like I said, and utilizes just the huge range of instrumentations this band has. It closes on a pretty explosive and joyous note as well, in a kind of post-rock way, which I thought was really cool. The next song, Bread Song, opens with one of the most intimate moments on the record. It's very kind of lightly finger-picked acoustic guitar, and lyrics that kind of read to me a little bit about the lead singer's headspace at the time of writing. And now we know that he kind of, cancelled the tour, and I think he's left. I'm still not 100% sure if he's actually left the band, but I know they've had to cancel a bunch of shows as a result of it. This makes a lot of sense as a result of that, and that's how it kind of reads to me. And the song keeps a very sparse instrumental palette, with just a couple kind of like hanging, droning notes in the background to help paint the sonic image. And I will say that this is probably the most in line with their older stuff to me, but I don't mind it because it's not taking up as much of this record as it did on the previous one, so it stands out much more here. It's actually, I would say, better for it, and that's not to say this is a badly written song or anything. It has that, more or less, what I've described as like the first half, essentially. Then it breaks away to this kind of like lightly tapped drums, and the song begins to build. This time with less droning and more melodic motifs until the song ends. And it's a nice song. It's solid. Wasn't a highlight exactly, but good for sure. The next song was definitely a highlight though. So Good Will Hunting opens with one of the few kind of like more groovy guitar riffs, I guess. And this riff keeps the whole song together. I love the way the drums lock into that riff in the first verse as well. It sounds really punchy and complements the singing style very well. But the song, in my opinion, really comes to life in the halfway point. So the drums come back in after a short, slightly more quiet section, and they come back with a halftime groove over the same riff, and the piano complements that riff as well. And this is all supported by Simpson wind instruments, and it just displays a lot of, like I said, great dynamics, and it's a very kind of, it's a good fusion, I guess, this section of the newer, slightly more upbeat sounding version of themselves. It's a good fusion of that and kind of the older sound, I suppose. And it was, I will say, on my first listen, it was at this point that it just hit me kind of all of a sudden how impressive everything was. It's kind of hard to describe a little bit. You'll notice I'm saying stuff like there's just a ton of colourful instruments, and it's cool for that reason. So it's one of those things I think you have to hear, because the interplay is what's so impressive. Everything feels very natural and very organic, even though it's very clearly planned out. And that level of detail, while making it sound so live and in the moment, is really cool to me. It all feels super jammed out for sure, despite the fact that it's obviously, planned and recorded, essentially. I'm sure there's maybe bits of improv here, but you get the idea. But after this point, like I said, more or less what I've stated is true of the next two songs, which are the only two that are before that kind of final, like the final three tracks that I alluded to earlier. So you have Holden, which basically the intro is carried by saxophone, guitar, and piano. It's another slower song, and it feels probably like it's more on the moodier end of what I've mentioned so far. And in the first minute, not a ton happens, but it sucks you in through pure atmosphere and these kind of like really nice, the nice layer of instruments, I guess. Then when the whole band comes in, again, you get a ton of great interplay and bright instrumentation, taking sort of swapping out for turns in the spotlight, which I thought was really nice. And around the 2/3 of the way through, I love the piano. There's these piano runs that go over the top of some of the more loudy and climactic parts of the song, and it just sounds great. It's a really, really good flourish for those parts of the song, and it helps it distinguish that part from some of the other louder parts on the record too. The ending with this like stabbing piano feels, it's kind of like a quiet section, but it feels really intense for how little is done essentially, and it's very well done. It kind of, you know, mirrors the front of the record, the front of this song, sorry, where it's sort of a quieter intro, but it sucks you in via just the atmosphere alone. And then the next song before the final three is Mark's theme. And this is essentially just a short instrumental interlude led by the saxophone. And it's a really nice break to the more lengthy, emotionally potent pieces. And that's definitely required because these final three songs are all incredibly ambitious, quite unique, and I feel like are something that only this band could really produce. So the first one of the three is the shortest. That's just over 7 minutes. I think 7 minutes 30, something like that. It opens with very delicately played piano, shortly accompanied by guitar and saxophone. It's a slower opening and it feels a little lighter, but once all the instrumentation kind of pops in, it has a very Baroque pop vibe and feels very bright and upbeat and a lot more peppy than the moody intro would have maybe implied. There's kind of this melodic explosion of instruments around the midpoint of the song, and it's just such a fantastic demonstration of the dynamic ability of the band. Because I feel like this song, in a way, feels like something La Dispute would pull off, where it's got so many different sections. It's so multifaceted, and there isn't really a chorus or a verse to speak of. And all they're doing is they're matching what feels like the emotions of the singer at any moment in time, and it really feels like this long winding journey as opposed to like a traditional song. And it's just very impressive. I don't really know what else to say about it. It's absolutely a highlight on the record, and it has, yeah, just so many parts and some of the best interplay across the entire record, I'd say, because they're trying to mirror and match the energy of the vocalist. So that was a great song. I will say one thing that was kind of weird is, yeah, it is quite a like pleasant sounding song and quite a like happy song, I suppose, considering the song is called The Place Where He Inserted the Blade, but I didn't pay enough attention to the lyrics to know whether the lyrics have a kind of darker, more sinister, yeah, like edge to them in contrast and juxtaposed with that. But yeah, that's something I guess you guys will have to check out. I didn't pay enough attention to know. The next song, Snow Globes, is the second longest out of these final three. It's 9 minutes long. And in direct contrast to the previous song, the intro feels very moody and downtrodden with sparse guitar playing, a very simple progression, and it just slowly builds with different elements coming in, and it has a very post-rocky vibe for sure, but it ends up staying very low-key for the vast majority of the song and hits a bit like a ballad. But one of the incredibly unique things about this song that I haven't really heard anywhere else that I can think of, or at least not to this extent, you essentially have this ballad-like, very simple progression, very atmospheric, slowly building kind of like core song, but then the drums come in, and once the drums come in, there's a ton of free-flowing, like very chaotic kind of rolls and fills that the drums are playing. And it starts at the midpoint, and it feels like it's such a clash with what's being played, but it works shockingly well. It just gives it a very unique quality. And what happens is both the percussion builds and gets more and more chaotic and intense as the song slowly is heading towards like its post-rock-esque peak. And the two end up intertwining without ever kind of matching each other's energy perfectly, but they intertwine so well that they reinforce each other completely. I would almost describe it as like a low-key chaotic post-rock ballad. Yeah, it's just incredibly unique. I haven't really heard anything else like this song before. I was incredibly impressed with it as well. It's another major highlight on the record for me. And then we get to the final song, Basketball Shoes, which is the longest song on the record, and it's actually by a fair margin as well. This song is like nearly 13 minutes long. It opens up quite similarly to the previous song, but instead of slowly building with different instruments playing the same progression, you end up having the instruments play different ideas, and they all kind of pop in with different little like melodic motifs and stuff like that. Eventually, some sparse percussion pops in to punctuate the chord progression underlying the song, and eventually it breaks away into nothing but the bones of the song where the vocals come in, and everything starts to build again. Now, it's at this point, it sounds quite similar to what we've heard, but it's still very captivating and has a kind of bittersweet quality to it that helps it stand out. And being the longest song, the band just packs in so many different emotions, dynamics, and ideas and gives everything so much time to develop, making the song essentially a incredibly sprawling and winding closer. It might not have anything that you haven't heard before on this record, but it still feels like a monumental celebration of everything that's happened so far, and for that reason, it stands out as a highlight again, because it's just so long and ambitious structurally that you kind of have to love it. There's a couple highlights I could point out, but you really should just listen to this song. Like, the riff that comes in around 7 minutes is one of... It comes in with this like very forceful and driving beats, and it eventually leads into one of the noisiest and most chaotic passages on the whole album. So I particularly loved that section. That riff is one of the few you get on the entire record, to be honest, and the way it's delivered as well, which is really cool. And then the whole song caps off with one of the biggest, most explosive climaxes across the whole record, which again is very fitting to a closing cut. And it features all of the elements of the album kind of crashing in on each other and playing off each other beautifully. Again, really celebrating this kind of interplay that the band must have developed over however long they've been playing together. That was what capped off my first listen to this record. I kind of fucking adored it. I'm really surprised it's as good as it is, or at least I'm enjoying it as much as I am. I really need to go back and listen to the first record too, because maybe I'm just being a big old dum-dum or something, I don't know, because this is almost too impressive for me to feel like the first album isn't for me, I guess. I don't know, maybe it's not, maybe everything I've said here is completely accurate and this album is just that much more detailed and ambitious, I don't know, but either way, that's basically everything I have to say. I quickly will say that January and the start of 2022, so like these last 40 days have been kind of awesome for music. There's been so many truly great releases, and this is one of the most impressive so far, so definitely don't sleep on this thing. It's pretty fantastic, to be honest. So yeah, I hope you'll enjoy it and let me know what you think of it in the comments. Cheers for listening if you've listened this long. I hope my absolute rambling vibe is going down okay. But yeah, cheers for listening, everyone. I'll hopefully see you all around. Alright, peace out.